Welcome to NOAA Live Alaska. My name is Story Oates, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. This series is a collaborative effort by NOAA Fisheries, Alaska Fisheries Science Center, where I work, NOAA's Alaska Regional Collaboration Network, and NOAA's National Weather Service. I also want to introduce my co-coordinator, Lisa Hiruki-Raring, who will be helping me behind the scenes. This webinar series is designed to help you get to know NOAA's work in Alaska, our partners, and the communities we work with, and how we connect with your community. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, studies the ocean and the atmosphere and where the two meet, from weather to oceans to the animals that live around us. This school year, we are presenting monthly webinars that feature our partnerships with organizations across Alaska. We are aiming to present perspectives from the communities we work with, as well as research conducted by established scientists and students. Today, we are introducing you to Ellie Gray Smith, Sealaska Heritage Institute's High School STEAM Mentorship and Internship Coordinator, Josh Russell, a fisheries biologist with Alaska Fisheries Science Center, and Barb Blake, an administrative assistant with Alaska's Regional Office. While we'll be talking about NOAA's and our partners' role in research and stewardship, we want to recognize that we are all coming to you from the traditional homelands of Indigenous communities who have substantial traditional and local knowledge and much to share with us. We acknowledge that the speakers you will hear from today work in and around the coastal waters of Southeast Alaska, primarily Juneau. Gunalshish to the Occoquan. We respectfully acknowledge the Occoquan Tlingit people as the original owners and inhabitants of the Juneau area. Gunalshish to the Takuquan Tlingit people, whose ancestral homeland surrounds the Taku River and the southern area of Douglas Island, which today is part of the city and borough of Juneau. We are grateful to be here in your ancestral homeland as we come to you from areas of Alaska and beyond. We are thankful that you permitted us to reside here and make this land our home. Gunalshish. We are presenting this webinar from Juneau, Alaska, the ancestral homelands of the Occoquan and Takuquan Tlingit people. The community thrives thanks to their continued sharing of vision, wisdom, values, and leadership. Lisa is joining from the greater Seattle area, the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish people past and present. A few guidelines before I hand you over to our first speaker. You are all muted because we have a lot of people on the line and we want to make sure everyone can hear our speakers. However, there is a box where you can write questions. We encourage you to ask them as we go, and my colleague Lisa and I will be keeping track for our speakers. We will stop every now and then and answer a few questions. We may not be able to get to all of our questions, but we'll try to answer as many as we can. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Ellie to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, students, teachers, professionals from all over. Thank you for letting me visit you today. I really also want to say a thank you to Story and Lisa for moderating this discussion for us, and I could not have said that land acknowledgement any better myself, so thank you very, very much for that too. I'll begin by introducing myself, and then I do have a few bits of information to share with you about the internship program. This is the Opening the Box High School Summer Internship Program through Sealaska Heritage Institute. And so as we get into it, as Story said, when you think of questions, hold on to them, think of them, save them till the end, because we will have time to answer. All right, let me make sure I can share my screen here. Excellent. Okay. As Story had said, my name is Ellie Gray Smith. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the internship coordinator at Sealaska Heritage. My contact information is at the top right of my screen here. And so that is my email and my phone number. If you have any questions that you need to save for after this conversation or think of anything later, you can certainly reach out to me there. I was born and raised in Alaska, primarily in South Central, but I call Southeast Alaska my home now. After graduating high school, I was recruited to play softball at St. Lawrence University in New York and believed that there I'd be pursuing a degree in anthropology. But I quickly found out that I actually really preferred informal education, and that is relating to the environment as well as key aspects of the world that directly affect us. After graduating from college, I took another path of coaching and playing softball professionally overseas, where I became even more excited about pursuing informal teaching for all ages in whatever form that may take, coaching in schools, out of schools, around the community, wherever I could do it. My passion is STEAM education, which I pursued while living in sunny, beautiful Florida, the land of Disney World, for a couple of years after I came back to the United States from traveling abroad. I realized that I really missed Alaska though, so I returned recently and now live here in Juneau with my loving husband, my dog, my cat. Yes, that is a bubble backpack, and you may see me around town with her. But I moved here to Juneau primarily to pursue this position at SHI, to assist high school students in finding the right path for them as they step into new chapters, and I'm just so thrilled to be part of those endeavors. I do still stick to my love of sports and being in the community of Juneau while I do that at the same time. We are going to jump into our STEAM internship discussion here. The STEAM internships that I'm speaking to you about today serve as a mode of connection to culture for Alaska Native students while also preparing you for the future. I have some detailed information that I'll share about how to get involved in internships, and then I believe our other panelists are going to speak about their experience in the internship itself. Did you know that only 0.1% of students in STEM disciplines, that's science, technology, engineering, math, are Alaska Native or American Indian? This means that the professional world is missing the incredible potential that you, with thousands of years of Indigenous knowledge in your histories and in your communities, can bring to the table. So we hope that these opportunities, like the high school internship, will help you show not only the people around you, but also feel really confident in yourself that success in a challenging professional system is possible, and not only possible, but can also be made all the better while implementing Indigenous cultural values. The next questions after why this program is important are, what am I signing up for? And is this program open to me? We are looking for 20 student interns this summer who are juniors or seniors in high school or recent high school graduates. All high school students are encouraged and welcome to apply, but it is important to remember and know that there are the age guidelines that I just outlined, but also there is a program preference for Alaska Native students in order to increase equitable representation in STEAM fields. Students will be placed in a STEAM company or organization here in Juneau for a 5-week paid summer internship, which can be extended to an 8-week internship if your project requires a longer commitment. We're also working with different communities around Juneau in Southeast Alaska to provide these internship opportunities too. So your internship may not be based solely in Juneau, but it is primarily where many of our intern hosts will be. Students can look forward to, in this position, job shadowing with their internship hosts, along with professional development through cohort meetings and cultural activities with the other students that you're in the internship program with. And you will learn how to be a young professional in a work environment that supports your knowledge and values, exemplifying harmony in your identity, along with your possible future careers. These great photos that are in our slide here show some of our student interns last year connecting with their internship projects through a wide variety of experiences and learning lots of new things along the way. To top off this really exciting program, you get to work closely with your internship host and SHI staff to create a capstone project. And this capstone project could be chosen to attend a conference with the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, all expenses paid. Meaning that your project, if it's chosen, could be showed and showcased at a conference with other students and other professionals to see the experience that you had in your internship. This example on our screen here of a capstone project was done by last year's NOAA intern, Jalen Bennett, who assisted in researching the condition of Dolly Varden fish in a local creek in Juneau. And she ended up doing a poster for her capstone project, but students may also choose to make their capstone project a video, a slideshow, or a different form of creativity that showcases what you learned in your internship. Student internship placement options this year are pretty impressive and really exciting. They include NOAA, Alaska Electric Light and Power, UAF Fisheries, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Southeast Alaska Native Tribes, and other partners around Southeast. You get to choose which internship experience is most appealing to you after applications close by reviewing internship project outlines from each placement. And then we arrange the details accordingly for you to the best of your ability and the best of our ability. Internship applications are open now. They will be closing on March 30th of this year. So you'll want to get your applications in soon. And it is a very competitive process, so the sooner the better. The internship session itself runs from mid-June through late July. So please get those applications in if you're looking for something to do this summer. This would be a really great opportunity. These are a couple of the flyers that if you travel to Juneau or are in Juneau, you might see around town, but also a digital copy is available if you would like us to send it to your classroom afterwards. Here are the flyers in general. There's two of them because one is for students and one is for internship hosts. We are still looking for professional locations, companies, organizations that think they would be a really good fit for internship hosts too. There on each of these flyers, just note the difference between the two. The one on the left is for students that are interested in applying, and the one on the right is for intern hosts. Each of them have a QR code on them, which you can scan, and it will take you right to the application. And for those of you that are listening as professionals and think you might have a really good spot for students to be at this summer as an intern host, your application date of closure will happen on March 30th too. So both student applications and intern hosts will close on March 30th. Here's my contact information again. Should anyone have any questions at all, you can certainly take a picture of this slide or just jot down my name, email, and phone number. I am here to guide you through the internship process. So please reach out if you think of anything that you need more clarification on. As I had mentioned before, we're accepting those internship applications for students now, and they will close on March 30th, and that is the same timeline for intern hosts. You are always welcome to reach out again if you need more clarifying questions or other things answered for you. And I'll just leave you with this final thought. You know, sometimes the most impactful times of your life can be when you least expect it or have no idea what you're getting into, don't really know what to expect, but you may not experience it unless you take that leap into a really incredible experience. So just like this one, try to jump in, think about the opportunities that could come from it, and always reach out should you need anything else. Ganashish for considering this as a stepping stone toward your success.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellie. We had a question that came up. You probably mentioned this earlier in your section, but we had a question about what ages of students you're looking for, whether it's any age in high school or whether you're looking for particular student ages. And also there was a question about whether if a student is a senior this year, whether they can apply because they will have actually graduated by the time that the internship starts.
Thank you. Good questions. So this particular program is really geared for rising juniors, rising seniors, and recent high school graduates. So if you're graduating in May, that's okay. You can still do this summer opportunity. We definitely encourage all students of all ages to apply at the high school level, so freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. But just keep in mind that there will be that preference in mind that we're trying to get the older students really set for their next steps after high school. So they would probably take precedence in the applications. So please, anyone and everyone apply. But for the older kids, this was a great opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much. One of the other questions that we had was they were wondering can you give some examples of the types of internships that were at like the Southeast Alaska Tribes and the Alaska Light and Power?
Sure, yes. So we actually have a couple of options going on right now for those. We've been working with Alaska Electric Light and Power for a little bit now, and we have a winter internship that AELP is doing with one student now, and they're actually focusing on climate studies and climate change science as it relates to avalanche analysis, which of course can only be done in the winter. During the summertime, you may find more projects based around planning out an electrical grid, helping out with thinking about how the community can best utilize power. And then in terms of the Southeast Alaska tribes, those projects are wide-reaching. There's lots of different opportunities there. We have some students that will be specifically leading cultural events for summer camps and for the culture camp some of you may have heard about. And some of the students will be acting as youth counselors to lead canoeing or dancing or teaching storytelling. So there's really, really great variety of options for both of those possibilities. Thank you for that question.
Wow, that sounds great. So I think that our listeners didn't realize that these internships could be during the winter as well. So is that why you have your internship applications open through the fall?
Oh, yes, excellent point on that one. This year, we tried our winter internship for the very first time. So this was a pilot option that we did with one of our students. It may be an option that will be available in the future. For now, primarily internships will be during the summertime though.
Okay, great. Let's see, and then let's see. So another question that we had was whether are the internships mostly available? Where are the internships available? Is it just in Juneau or is it in other communities as well?
Mm-hmm. Many of our internships will be primarily available in Juneau and surrounding communities. The person that I had mentioned who is looking for students to help with the culture camp, their base is in Hoonah, for example, and there's a few other communities around that may be having intern hosts come up, but it will primarily be in Juneau that most of the internship experiences will be.
Okay, great, thank you. And then are there other opportunities for students that that happen during the summer or during the school year through Sealaska Heritage Institute?
Well, yes, thank you. There sure are. We have a couple of summer camps that are coming up for both high school and middle school ages. The high school camp is the one that goes first during the summer months. If you need more information on dates for that, you can certainly reach out and I will get those to you. And then the middle school happens a little bit later in July timeframe. But they are 10-day overnight camps where students do get to travel into Juneau and be here for a really expansive and interesting experience of pursuing different career paths if you're in the high school one. And then for the middle school one, it is also more of a culture camp too, and a creativity camp and a builder's camp. So those are definitely great options to look into, and those are for the summertime. The main difference between the two is that, of course, internships you'll be doing on the job, potential job shadowing, but also work experience that is paid. The summer camps, we do fly you in and you have the opportunity to be here. So both are really, really excellent options. I hope that I get to see many, many, many of you to join us for this summer.
Those sound like really good programs. Well, I think maybe we'll hold on to the rest of our questions for now and move on to our next section. But thank you very much, Ellie, and we'll probably call you back to answer some more questions at the end.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right, great. Next up, we have Josh. It looks like you're muted, Josh.
Is that better?
That's much better.
Hey, hit the wrong button. Perfect. My name is Joshua Russell. I want to give you a quick little talk today, coming off of the end of what Ellie gave on an excellent presentation about Sealaska Heritage's internship program. I was one of the intern hosts this last summer and hosted a student at my work site. I'm a fisheries research biologist with the NOAA Fisheries at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Juneau. I've been in that position for about 10 years now. So kind of wanted to give you a little bit of talk about how I got to that position, what my field work and work looks like on a daily basis, and then focus on our internship program host that we had last summer. So just a little bit background about me. How did I become a fish biologist? I actually started at a very similar path as some of these high school students. This picture here on the left is actually me, my summer after high school, working at the Ock Creek Weir. I was put in that position through a similar internship program where I saw posts come out my senior year of high school about we're looking for high school interns. See if you're interested. I applied, and like Ellie said, you don't know how such a small, seemingly little thing can turn into something large. That 5 minutes I spent applying turned into now my career path. I've always kind of been interested in biology. The picture on the right is me. I was probably in about 6th, 7th grade when I really started getting into salmon fishing. So it's kind of been a passion for me for a long time, being into biology and fisheries. But what really set that in motion for me was I was living in Utqiagvik, which is, or what the time was known as Barrow in northern Alaska. And there was a whale biologist that was doing a necropsy, collecting samples from a whale that was taken for a traditional harvest up there. And he kind of saw me off watching in the distance. He kind of waved me over and he started handing me things like, here, put this in a bottle. And he started explaining little things of this is brain tissue, this is part of the reproductive organs, this is stomach lining. And he took 20 minutes out of his day to kind of just show this little kid some interesting things. And that's what kind of started that passion for me for biology, was just another one of those little things that just took some time out of his day and showed me some things. And that's started me onto this path where I am today now as a biologist for NOAA. So what I work at is the Ock Creek Research Station, which is a weir here in Juneau, Alaska. We're lucky to have a fully functioning research site in the capital of our state. And in general, for those of you who aren't familiar as to what is a weir, because then we might have people here from across the nation, a weir at its most basic form is just a method of fish capture. So we have here on this picture, you can see there are vertical poles that are driven into the creek. There are supports that are run across the creek, and then just pickets that are placed. And as fish, the left-hand side of this picture is the downstream moving upstream. As fish move upstream, they hit that weir face and they can't move up. At that point, they can either be captured for harvest or collected for sample work. This is an ADF-NG weir that's used for just blocking fish passage. One thing that's personally kind of interesting to me is that weirs have actually been around for an incredibly long time. Actually, one of the oldest man-made structures in North America is a weir that was found in the Pacific Northwest that's over 14,000 years old. So this is a technology that's been around forever. These two pictures you see on the left-hand side, in the top along the middle, you can see just this row of rocks that's the remains of what used to be a traditional weir that was used for traditional harvest. And then on the lower left-hand picture, there is the remains of another weir that was found in a Kentucky river. So this is an ancient technology that's been used for thousands of years. That's traditional knowledge. And what we're doing at Ock Creek is we're borrowing that traditional knowledge to use for modern science. So my weir where I work at, you can see here on the right-hand side, it's the same general premise. In that top right picture, you can see there's vertical poles that go into the creek, even though in this case they're permanent steel I-beams. And there is metal plating that runs across the creek, and that just captures any fish that are moving upstream and allows us to capture them for research. You can see in that lower right, as fish move up through the weir, there's a channel that they can move through, and they're captured in this adult capture pen where we can take samples for any type of research that we need to do, from anything from genetics work, looking at changes in populations, seeing how maybe the age is changing of them, or if the fish quality of the fish. We can take scales for aging work, as well as any smaller research projects that we're currently working on. One interesting thing about the Ock Creek weir is that we're the only weir in the nation that can do 100% upstream and downstream capture, which means we capture every single fish that moves upstream, from your large coho that are about the size of a small family dog down to pink fry, which are maybe the size of your upper part of your thumb and weigh the same amount as a few houseflies. So we can capture everything, and that allows us to do some really powerful research, seeing how populations are changing over time due to potential harvest impacts from local fisheries, as well as due to climate change, seeing how these systems are changing as a result of warming climates, changing food availability in the oceans, and how that's impacting our salmon population. Salmon is a vital resource and one of the largest fisheries in the world, and it's important that we understand how these impacts are affecting them and how we can try to mitigate for that future to make sure that that resource is a valuable one that's there for future generations. So that's kind of a small part of what we do at Ock Creek, is getting a census of this population that we've been doing for over 45 years. So we have an excellent time series to look at some of these questions over the long term. One other excellent part of what we can do is we can have excellent internship opportunities. Like I mentioned, I was one of these interns in the summer of 2013, so almost 10 years ago. I was a high school intern at Ock Creek, and it fostered into my career path, and now I'm trying to give back some of that, what I was given. So now we're doing this excellent partnership with Sealaska Heritage that we got to do last summer, and got to have Jalen Bennett, who is a student from Juneau. She just recently graduated high school, came and worked for us for about 6 weeks. When she came to us, she didn't have any experience in fisheries biology, and then 6 weeks later when she left, she was able to function and work as a part of a team running a field research weir in inclement weather. She gained important knowledge on sample collection, as well as we do a lot of hydrological work. You can see in the bottom left, she was there taking stream flow measurements, as well as taking nutrient measurements in the lake. So we can give interns a broad experience in even those 6 weeks, because there's a lot of work that we do, and can quickly get students to see if they're interested in biology and if it's something they want to pursue as a career path. She was able to do an excellent job working with us. And one of the other things we like to try to do is have these students work on a internship project. It's important for us to not only give these students the tools to work in these environments, but also try to start to think like scientists. We want them to be able to think about a question that they want to answer, how they can go about forming a research project to answer that, and then going through the analysis and the final presentation. So we take them from just having that question to a final result in those 6 week period. And that's one of the goals that we like to try to do. One of the questions that Jalen had was, what are the condition of some of these fish moving upstream? So we had her looking at a project with Dolly Varden, which was basically looking at, does the condition of these fish change throughout the run? Are there healthier fish moving at a certain time? Is there a certain time when there's weaker fish? And one way that we can look at that is through condition factor. And condition factor is just a simple relationship between length and weight. And it can basically tell us one value that says, is this fish large and skinny, or is it large and fat, or small and skinny? And it allows us to see how good that fish is doing as it's moving through the system. Ideally, we're looking for those large, fatter fish, meaning that they've been able to eat well and they're going to have the best chance of survival. Also, we know that larger fish or females produce more eggs, which means there's going to be more offspring. So our goal is to make sure that we're seeing those large fish. And the way she did that was, in the previous photo, you could see some of her measuring work. So she would daily take lengths and weights from all migrant Dolly Varden, and then she formed a condition factor. So we can see here on the left side, we have length and weight, and then that relationship between the two, and then she calculated the condition factor. And one thing that's kind of interesting that we saw from this that we weren't expecting to see is on this right-hand figure, it goes from 7/3 through 8/7 or August 7th. We saw that condition factor actually increased throughout the run, which wasn't what we expected, which meant that the later in the run you get, the larger and healthier fish that you're seeing, which we kind of expected it would have been the opposite. The larger, healthier fish would have been moving earlier. So it's really important that we knew this information, and this is something that Jalen got to look into for us, that without her help, we wouldn't have had the manpower to be able to do all these samples and collect. So it's really important actually to have these internships, because we're limited in what we can do, and actually having these internships allows us to do more research and to answer cool questions like this. And as Ellie showed, Jalen did an excellent job putting together her final presentation poster here that highlighted some of her work that she did, the local area, as well as her species of interest. So this was kind of the final capstone on her project, and I can't believe how great of a job she did, and we're looking forward to working with Sealaska moving forward to have more internship opportunities like this and to bring more students into the field of biology, hopefully. With that, is there any questions?
Great, thank you so much, Josh. That was really interesting. We did have a question. You had the picture of Jalen doing a bunch of different things in one photo, and you had talked a little bit about how she had looked at length and weight. I was wondering whether you could talk us through each of those photos to say what, those photos to say what she was doing in each of those.
Yeah, for sure. So in the top left photo here, you can see Jalen. She's wrangling or trying to wrangle what looks like a sockeye salmon into this trough, basically. So in that trough, it's just a piece of PVC with neoprene mesh in there that kind of protects the fish. It is nice, cool water in that trough for them as well, so it calms them down, allows us to take any samples. So she's just putting that fish into there. It allows us to take genetic samples as well as scale samples. So it's kind of that's one of the positions that we don't normally let our interns do because it takes a lot of work and to properly do it without measuring issues and causing issues for the fish. But Jalen, we called her the Zen master because she was somehow able to grab these fish that were freaking out and they'd be perfectly calm for her, but for no one else. So she did an excellent job doing that. In the top right here, we have her doing her Dolly Varden project. So the board you can see on the table is just a measuring board where we can get total length of the fish, and then she would drop them into that bucket, which was on a scale so that we can get weights. Lower left is Jalen and one of our college interns, Gage, doing a hydrological measurement. So we're just measuring across the creek, getting different flow measurements, and that allows us to calculate total flow out of the creek on that day, which is super useful to us for a lot of other projects, knowing how much water is flowing through the creek, and it's also a very useful skill for any field biologist to know how to do. And then lower right side is the end result of the upper left picture. So after we've sampled those fish, we then release them upstream into the creek. So it's important to realize that at Otter Creek, we are touching every single fish and taking samples, but after we do that, we release them on their way unharmed and to continue on the rest of their life cycle to go spawn.
Great. And there was a question about, so you said that the first picture had a different, no, it wasn't a Dolly Varden, it was another kind of salmon. How many different kinds of salmon do you get at the weir?
So of the 5 Pacific salmon species, or northern Pacific salmon species, we get 4 of them. So that is sockeye, pinks, chum, and coho. However, chum are not natural to Otter Creek, but we still do get some of them that come in.
And then in addition to that, you have Dolly Varden, which is a trout, right?
Yes, so we in addition have Dolly Varden, which are a char or trout, as well as cutthroat trout and Pacific sculpin, 3-spine sticklebacks. So there's a lot of other smaller species that are migrating through, but our main focus is on those major salmon species, as well as cutthroats and Dolly Varden.
Great. Do you, when you have interns over several summers, can they follow up on other interns' projects, or do interns come back to continue their projects or to do a second year if they want to?
Couple questions in there. So I guess we do have interns that come back. So throughout my entire time going to University of Alaska Southeast through my bachelor's degree program, I came back every summer and was able to continue working on the project that I was working at the time, was looking at changes in length of Pacific salmon species that were migrating to Otter Creek, seeing how that length is changing over time. So we're always happy if interns do well and they enjoy what they worked on, to always have them come back the next summer through a different internship program, potentially to continue that same research. If there's something that they kind of got to see the last summer that they're interested in, we can develop a new research project for them. And then if in the event that we have another Sealaska student that comes in, we would definitely like to continue this Dolly Varden project, especially considering the unique results that we had seen. So if there is interest, they could jump on this project, or we can form a new project for them to work on.
Great. Have you done condition factors for other species of fish as well?
We have. So we collect condition factor information on the major salmon species. So that would be the pink, the sockeye, and the coho that are coming through Otter Creek. That is where that takes up a good portion of our time. So the weir runs 7 days a week from mid-February through end of October. And most of our time is focused on getting all the information that we need from those 3 major species, because those are what interest to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game for fisheries management. So we collected the information on them, but like I said, we weren't able to do it on dollies just because we didn't have the time until we had Jalen able to help us.
Great. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of different types of projects that interns could come up with working at the Weir.
Definitely, yeah. There are no shortage of projects and ideas that we could come up and reasonably answer in that 6-week period.
Great. And I was really excited to hear that you also, work with the students to get a project for them and kind of guide them through how to come up with a question and, what sort of considerations you might need to think about in terms of answering that question. And so, because I think that sort of experience is really valuable to students. And I was wondering whether was that your experience when you were an intern, is that you walked through that procedure as well, or had you done those kinds of things previously?
I was in the same position when I came to Otter Creek. I knew I was interested in biology. I'd obviously had some experience in high school with my biology classes, but in terms of practical field knowledge, I didn't really have any. That phrase I use, learning to think like a scientist, is the phrase that my mentor used, and that's what he said. If I learned nothing during my internship, he wanted me to at least be able to learn to think like a scientist, to be able to observe something that's happening, to think of a question of like why. So we observed these Dolly Varden coming through, just to use her project as an example. We see changes in the size. Why is that size there and why is it important? And then to think of, okay, the size is important. It might be these larger fish have more eggs. How can we look at this? What's an easy way? We can set up an additional trap to capture these Dolly Varden, and then we can take lengths and weights, which is a simple way. It's minimally invasive to the fish that allows us to get this condition factor. And then we can do analysis, learning how to plot figures intelligently and to do linear regression analysis, which is a method of statistical analysis, just looking at linear trends. And that's what allowed us to see that change in length over time, or change in condition factor over time, sorry. So it's all part of just fostering that ability to think like a scientist, to go through the scientific method. And I think that's really valuable for students these days in STEM fields, just to try to learn to think like a scientist. And that's the main thing that we try to impress on students through their internships with us at Otter Creek.
Wow, that's great. And I have one more question before we move on to our next presenter, but you had said that one of the things that from Jalen's project that surprised you was that the condition factor went up as the season went on, and that you would have expected that the fish that came back earlier would be in better condition. But is that because that happens with other species?
Yes, so that is typically what we see with other salmon species. We see that the earliest fish coming back to the run are the most fit fish, so the best condition. The reason for that being is that as they're out in the marine environment, they're feeding, they're evading predators, and typically those larger fish, the bigger they are, the stronger they are, the faster they can swim. They're able to get to food better, and so they're ready to come back sooner, basically, to come back to the freshwater system to spawn. So typically in this period that we see here, in this early period of the run, it's always those largest fish that are most ready to go. And then those smaller fish are still out in the marine environment. They're still feeding, they're still getting bigger, they're getting stronger, making their way home. And so we'd expect to see this trend here reverse from largest fish to smaller fish later in the run. So it was really interesting to see that that is different with Dolly Varden. One potential hypothesis for that we think is that Dolly Varden exhibit something called synchrony, which means they follow other species. So we're seeing in a project that we did previously at Otter Creek that a few weeks after we see adult salmon come in, we see Dolly Varden come in. So they're following those salmon to eat their eggs because that's a good, valuable food resource for them, high in lipids. So potentially we're thinking that it's these smaller fish that we can't quite cut it out in the marine environment. Let's go home early and see if we can get some salmon eggs. And then the fish that are larger are doing fine in the marine environment. They're comfy, so they're coming in later. So that's a potential hypothesis that we think could explain this trend. And it's something that we'd like to look at further.
Great. Wow, that's really interesting. Thanks so much, Josh. I really appreciate your time talking about Jalen's project.
Happy to be here. And then thank you guys for having me.
All right, thanks, Josh. And we are going to move over to Barb.
Hi, everybody. All right. So hopefully, thanks, Story. Can you see my screen now?
It was just there. I can see you now. There it is. You just have to hit the slideshow. There
All
we
right.
go.
Thanks, Story. All right, everybody. Well, this has already been a really wonderful presentation, and luckily, I get to build off of what everyone else has already said. So my name is Barb Lake. I also work with NOAA Fisheries. Unlike Josh, who is out at our NOAA lab, which is out at Lena Point, I am downtown in the federal building at our regional office. So the difference is that at the regional office, we really focus on the governing rules and regulations around fisheries of all kinds. So the habitat that the fish live in, the fish themselves, and then the things that eat the fish, like us and marine mammals. So I got involved in NOAA Fisheries through a long career of basically being a nerd and being interested and being outside and just always asking questions. I grew up in upstate New York, which was not very close to the ocean. And so I think that's what interested me in the ocean, was that I didn't have it close by to me. And so I was curious to go out and find it. So at NOAA, where I work, we focus on many different things and ask a lot of questions. And one of the divisions that I work for is our Habitat Conservation Division, where I work with Linda Shaw here on the right. And Linda and I, we are interested in a new invasive species that has made its way to Alaska, called the invasive green crab, also known as the European green crab. And so we have been working for quite a long time with the Metlakatla Indian community, which is at the most southern point of Southeast Alaska, to start some early monitoring efforts to try and see when this crab comes to shore, and when it does, do something about it. And so luckily, Natalie Bennett, our Sea Alaska intern, was interested and able to help us out with that. And so as you can see in this photo here, this is actually Natalie holding the carapace, or the shell, of one of these invasive crabs. So it's interesting about Natalie is that she was interested in STEAM, which is why she signed up for the program, but didn't have anything specific that she was identified with or knew that she wanted to study. She basically just was interested in STEAM, but not really sure where to go from there. And that was totally fine and actually perfect, because there's a lot of different things that we do at NOAA. And so it was very easy to let her know about all of the things and see what clicked with her. And so when I met with her and basically brought every piece of outreach material that we have, from everything from marine mammals like whales and sea lions to seaweeds and aquaculture, she really was interested in this invasive species issue. And so the crabs struck her fancy, and so we were very excited to get her involved in this new project of ours. So just to, if anybody isn't familiar with where Metlakatla is, you can see in the lower left of this image of Southeast Alaska here. This is the part of Southeast that we're talking about. And Metlakatla is a native reserve and the only one in the state of Alaska. So it's very unique in the way that it governs itself, and it is the most southern point of the state. And so we knew that there were crabs about 60 miles from Alaska in Canada. And so we began our monitoring efforts with Metlakatla in 2020 and have ever since just increased different ways of looking for these crabs. And so Natalie identified with this project partially because of the area that we were looking at. So Natalie has family both in Metlakatla and Ketchikan. And so the thought of an invasive species possibly doing harm to those habitats where her family live and subsist on native foods in the areas was very important to her. So I have a question for the audience. How do you think we find crabs out in the environment? So what do you think we do to try and find a crab? And if you have ideas, go ahead and drop it in the chat.
So if for those of us in the audience, if you have any idea of how they would find crabs, please type it into the chat and we'll see what people think. So we'll give it a couple minutes here while people are putting them in. Mr. Cook's class is saying traps, maybe. There's another answer of finding them on the beach, looking for. Well, you had mentioned that you had found a molt on the beach, so that was one of the suggestions that were made. Yeah, I think that those are the questions. Those are the guesses that we have so far.
Fantastic. Well,
Oh, and there's one more. Stomachs of predators.
oh, great ideas. Yes, that every single one of those is a great way to find crabs. But I think the first thing you need to know is how to find what you're looking for. So we have lots of native crabs in the state of Alaska that you can find in the tidal. So you can walk out when the tide is low on the beach and find these different crabs. So you need to know which one you're looking for. So specifically for this species of invasive crab, it's very easy to tell it apart from our native crabs. So you can see in this image, the eyes are labeled, and from the eye back, there are 5 spines. So from the eye, 5 spines. And it is the only crab in our state that has those 5 spines after the eye. So it was very easy when you find a shell of a crab or a piece of a shell of a crab to look at those spines and count them and see if it had the right number or not, and if it was something that we needed to be concerned with. So great ideas. And actually, a lot of the ones that you guys mentioned are what we did and taught Natalie. So this first method is called a carapace survey. And this is something very easy that anyone can do. You don't have to be a scientist to be able to do a carapace survey. And so what you can do with these is just go out onto the beach and set a timer for 15 minutes and have everyone go to a different spot on the beach and pick up as many crabs as you can. So usually when you do this at a low tide, you're not picking up live crabs. They're usually the molts or the shells. So crabs are really interesting. If you know what a cicada is, they do something sort of similar where they shed their outer shell every time they grow. So what they leave behind is this hollowed out shell. And so they're very light and they get kicked up on the beach. And so what we would do is scoop up as many as we could in 15 minutes and then identify what species we had found and see if any of those were the invasive crab. And so the first time we did this on this beach, we didn't find any of the invasive crab. We hadn't found any up to this point, so it was pretty normal. But later on, we actually did another carapace survey, and that is when we found the shell of one of these crabs. So as you all mentioned before, another way is with traps. So different traps can find different sizes of crabs at different ages. And so one of those is off of a boat with deeper set traps. And so this is a picture of Spencer dropping a trap line. So there are 5 crab pots that we would drop in the water and leave them down at the bottom for about a day, and then come back the next day, pull them up and see what we caught. And the picture right next to that is Natalie pulling it up the next day from the buoy. And so we would do the same thing that we would do for carapace surveys, we would do for the live crabs. So we would pull them out of the traps, see what species they were, take a couple of measurements, and then release them back into the ecosystem. And so this was another method where we hadn't caught any of the invasive crab, and so everything was normal. And another method is through using eDNA. And so eDNA is really interesting, where you can take water samples and test them for different types of DNA from different types of animals. And so we were specifically looking for the DNA of these invasive crabs. And so we were actually able to get detections of the crabs through the water samples. So that's a really easy way to check for the crabs. And then last but not least, in addition to doing the beach surveys, Metlakatla is really interesting, where they have these ancient native fish traps. And so not only are they really great for catching fish when the tide cycle changes, but they also catch a lot of crabs. And so they were always full of these little crabs that were taking refuge in this tidal pool. And so we were able to put some traps in there and catch crabs, and then check and see if we the invasive ones. And then the other way was just looking through all of the crabs that were in these tidal pools and seeing if we could see any with the naked eye and try and catch them, which they're pretty fast. So that's a pretty fun thing to try to do. And so Natalie, like I said, is the first person in Alaska to have found evidence of these crabs. So the middle picture is the actual carapace, our first carapace that we ever found. And she found it in a very high tidal area. So the picture on the left with all the grasses is actually where she found it. So in the pictures before, where we were down on the rocks of the beach looking for crabs, that's normally where we as scientists will do carapace surveys. And so for Natalie, she had actually been told by her uncle to look in these really high areas, especially after storms, because these really light carapaces that the crabs have shed will get blown up and pushed up in the storm surge and then tangled up in the grasses. And so keeping that in mind, when we were out on the beach, she looked a little bit higher and indeed found our invasive crab. And so with that, we redoubled all of our trapping efforts and have ever since been have switched from monitoring for this invasive species to now actually trapping and specifically trying to remove it from the environment. And so it's really we're so fortunate to have had Natalie, and the fact that she was not only interested in this project, but also like the best person in the world for seeing these shells. She was always finding twice as many as the rest of us. And oddly, it seemed to be easy. So I think she was just a magnet for these shells. So we couldn't have done it without her. And we absolutely had a blast in Metlakatla with her and her entire family, giving us really an intimate view of the entire island. So with that, I will take any questions that folks have.
Great, thank you so much, Barb. And what a really cool story. You know, this is one of those stories that really remind me of how Indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge can kind of braid together to give a complete picture, because, you know, Natalie was thinking about the advice that her uncle had given her based on his experience of seeing the carapaces fly up in the wind, and so it really makes me think about some of our efforts of trying to have more Indigenous knowledge infused into our studies and our education. Yeah.
Whoa. Yes, for sure. That's absolutely the case. If it wasn't for Natalie, there's so many aspects of that trip to Metlakatla to visit with the Fish and Wildlife Division that just, it wouldn't have the same impact without her. You know, her family got to share the area with us and tell us about, you know, these are the beaches that we go and look for abalone, and this is where, you know, at the low tides, you know, anybody at any age can just walk out and get their Dungeness crabs to eat for dinner, and they don't need a boat. So it was, you know, having that knowledge was just absolutely phenomenal and gave us a better feeling for what it's like to live and rely on these areas.
That's so great. What are the options for future projects that your office might have for interns?
Yes, absolutely. So there was a slide before where I showed you how I brought all the outreach things to Natalie just to see if we could find something that she would be interested in. And behind the crab poster was all of our tons of different outreach and things. And so a lot of the things that we do is with marine mammals. So we have a stranding network where we are always looking for any dead or injured marine mammals to see if we can either help them get back into the environment or collect some information about why they may have died, so we can, keep an eye on the population and see if, everything's okay or if something's wrong. So there are tons of different topics that you can get involved with at NOAA Fisheries, especially with us at the federal building, where we do a lot of the regulatory things, which maybe at first glance doesn't sound as glamorous, but there's always different aspects to everything that we do. There's also a lot that we do with Josh out at the lab. So with the researchers, there's a lot of balance between the two. Like, we use a lot of the information that the researchers gather to inform our regulatory decisions. And then a lot of times there are things that we don't have a lot of information on that we ask the researchers if they can do a project on it. So I think the sky is kind of the limit. As long as it's tied to the marine environment, we can find a way to get you involved.
Great. And I see that we have about 4 minutes left, so I was going to ask whether Ellie and Josh can come back on camera, because I was going to ask the same question of all of you guys to finish up. And the question that I wanted to ask is, if you had one piece of advice to give to a high school student who is looking at this program, or considering like whether they wanted to do an internship, or even like considering their next step in what they wanted to do, what piece of advice would you give to them? And I know I kind of sprung this on you, so I apologize if it kind of takes you by surprise. But I think that for those of us who work with students, a lot of the times there are things that we would like to tell students beforehand, just to think about. And so, Ellie, I was wondering whether you might want to start.
Sure, Lisa. Yes. In my experience working with students and especially students and people here in the community of Southeast Alaska, there are so many really valuable resources, not only that the community can provide, but also that humans and people around you can provide. And so my piece of advice that when you are considering your opportunities that come up during the summer times or during the school years, just keep an open mind. And know that you're not alone in trying to figure out what you want to do. All of the other students that you're around have the same experience of, I don't really know what to do next. I'm feeling a little bit lost. And so if you're one of those students right now, know that you're not alone and use your resources around you to take those next steps as you're looking at your future professions, whether that be in college, not in college, a trade, going back into your community. Whatever it is, you are valuable and you have those resources around you that can help you achieve success.
Well said, Ellie. I would totally agree with everything that Ellie said. I would also say, even at my age and where I am in, I work for NOAA Fisheries, I still feel like, what do I do next? Or what am I interested in? And it's all of the things. So I think, especially with this internship program, if you want to get involved with something like that, there are so many things out there with folks that are looking to get you involved. And so reach out to them and get involved in those things and see how those connections could lead you to something that you never expected. I never expected to live in Alaska, and, things just turned out this way because of my curiosity. And luckily, the people that I was around that were able to really push me into the different things that I was maybe a little nervous to try at first.
Well said, Ellie and Barb. That's along the lines of what I was going to say. For sure, definitely do not be afraid to try something. I got a couple of things, I guess, from my experience. Don't be afraid to try something new. In the grand scheme of things for this internship, it's 6 weeks. It's a chance to get out, try to learn something new, see if you have an interest in it. In the long run, that's not a huge amount of time. And don't be afraid to be new or bad at something. At one point or another, we were all there. We all at some point or another had no experience. Don't worry that you're coming into an area where you might not know. Don't be afraid to be bad or to be new at something, because that's how you learn and that's where you gain experience. And part of that is finding a really strong mentor. I wouldn't be where I was today without the mentors I had along the way. So that made a huge impact on me. So don't be afraid to be bad or new at something and find a strong mentor.
Great. Thank you guys so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Story to finish us up.
All right. Thank you all. So excited to have Ellie and Barb and Josh on with us today, speaking about the Sealaska Heritage Institute's Opening the Box internship opportunity. And, you know, for all of you watching, we hope that you will at least check out the internship, look at the flyers, ask questions. All of us are here to help you, whether you know you're going to do an internship in Southeast Alaska or somewhere else. There's lots of opportunities, and so we're all here to help you move on to that next step, whatever that might be. So we will have a recording. It will be available at the end of this week. So feel free to share it with other teachers, instructors, your friends, family. We all are really looking forward to the next cohort of students coming in and working at NOAA, AELMP, all over the place. So thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned. We will have more information about our next NOAA Live Alaska webinar coming up in February. So thank you all. Take care. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.